Princess Lyra stood in the shadows of the great hall, watching her brothers laugh and boast about their victories. They were tall and strong, with muscles that could crush stone and voices that filled every corner of the palace. She was small by Valdrin standards, barely reaching her brother's shoulders. Her arms were thin, her frame slight. In a race built for war, she looked like a mistake. "Did you hear about Lyra's test yesterday?" her eldest brother, Prince Kale, said loudly. He knew she could hear him. He always knew. She couldn't even lift the training hammer. The instructor said it was embarrassing. The nobles around him laughed. Lyra felt her face grow hot, but she didn't move. She had learned long ago that defending herself only made things worse. Better to stay quiet, to be invisible, to let them forget she existed. King Vorath sat on his throne at the far end of the hall. He was massive, even for a Valdrin, with scars covering his arms and chest from 100 battles. His eyes swept over the room and landed on Lyra for just a moment. Then he looked away as if she wasn't worth his time. That look hurt more than any of her brother's words. The banquet was being held to welcome visitors from Earth. Humans, they were called. Lyra had heard stories about them. They were even smaller than she was, weak by Valdrin standards, but somehow they had built ships that could cross the stars. Some of the nobles thought humans were a joke. Others weren't so sure. The doors opened and the human delegation entered. There were 5 of them, dressed in dark blue uniforms with strange symbols on their chests. They walked with confidence, their heads held high, even though every Valdrin in the room could break them in half without effort. The leader stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Your Majesty, I am Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Alliance vessel Endeavor. We come in peace and friendship." Jake was tall for a human with short brown hair and steady green eyes. He didn't look afraid, even though he was surrounded by warriors who could kill him with a single blow. Lyra found that interesting. Most people were afraid of something, but this human showed no fear at all. "Welcome, Captain Morrison," King Vorath said, his voice booming. "Sit, eat. Let us talk of trade and treaties." The humans took their places at the table. Lyra stayed in her corner, hoping no one would notice her. She had learned to be good at that. But as the feast began, she felt someone watching her. She glanced up and met Jake's eyes. He was looking at her with an expression she didn't recognize. It wasn't mockery or pity. It was something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or concern. The feast went on for hours. There were speeches and toasts, demonstrations of strength where Valdrin warriors bent metal bars and broke wooden posts with their bare hands. The humans watched politely, though Lyra could tell they found it all a bit strange. When her brother Kale challenged one of the human officers to an arm wrestling match, Jake quietly declined on his behalf. "We humans know our limits, Prince Kale," Jake said with a slight smile. "Strength isn't everything, though. We prefer to win with our minds when possible." Some of the Valdrin laughed at that. Strength was everything in their culture. A warrior without strength was nothing. Lyra knew that better than anyone. As the night wore on, Lyra slipped away from the hall. She walked through the quiet corridors of the palace until she reached the gardens. It was dark outside, but the twin moons of Valdris gave enough light to see by. She found her usual spot, a small clearing hidden behind tall bushes, and drew her practice blade. It was a light sword, much smaller than the ones her brothers used. Even so, her arms ached after just a few swings. She practiced the forms her instructors had tried to teach her, but they felt wrong. They required strength she didn't have, reach she couldn't match. Every movement was a reminder of her failure. "Your stance is too wide," a voice said behind her. Lyra spun around, raising her blade defensively. Jake Morrison stood at the edge of the clearing, his hands raised in a peaceful gesture. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to startle you. I needed some air and saw you practicing." "You should go back to the feast," Lyra said quietly. "If my father finds out I'm here instead of inside, he'll be angry." "Why would he be angry that you're training?" Lyra laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Because I'm wasting my time. Everyone knows I'll never be a warrior. I'm too weak, too small. I'm an embarrassment to the royal family." Jake walked closer, studying her form. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to her blade. She handed it to him, confused. He took it and moved through a series of quick strikes and blocks. His movements were different from any Valdrin style she'd seen. They were faster, more efficient, with no wasted motion. "Human combat technique," he explained, handing the blade back. "We developed it because we couldn't match other species in raw strength. So we learned to fight smarter instead of harder. That sounds like cheating, Lyra said, though she was fascinated despite herself. Jake shrugged. Maybe, but it works. On Earth we have a saying, it's not the size of the warrior in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the warrior. I watched you in that hall tonight. You stood there while your brothers mocked you and you didn't run away or cry. That takes courage. Courage doesn't matter if you can't win. Who says you can't win? Jake asked. You're trying to fight like your brothers, using their techniques, their style. But you're not your brothers. You need to find your own way to fight. Lyra wanted to believe him, but years of failure weighed on her. Even if that were true, no one would teach me. The instructors say I'm hopeless. Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he smiled. What if I taught you? Human style. Different techniques that work with your strengths instead of against them. Why would you do that? Lyra asked suspiciously. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. No, I don't, Jake agreed. But I had a younger sister back on Earth. She was small like you. Everyone told her she couldn't be a pilot because she didn't fit the profile. She proved them all wrong. When I look at you, I see the same determination in her eyes. You're not hopeless, Princess Lyra. You've just been taught the wrong lessons. For the first time in years, Lyra felt something warm bloom in her chest. It wasn't confidence, not yet. But it was hope, and that was something she thought she'd lost forever. When do we start? She asked. Jake's smile widened. Tomorrow night. Same place. Wear clothes you can move in. We have a lot of work to do. As he walked away, Lyra stood alone in the moonlight, her practice blade in her hand. Maybe the human was wrong. Maybe she really was hopeless. But for the first time in her life, someone had looked at her and seen something other than a failure. That was worth taking a chance on. The next evening, Lyra waited in the garden clearing as the sun set behind the palace walls. She had changed into simple training clothes, dark and loose, nothing that would identify her as royalty. Her heart pounded in her chest. Part of her expected Jake not to come. Why would he waste his time on her? But then she heard footsteps and Jake appeared through the bushes. He carried a small bag and wore casual clothes instead of his uniform. He looked more relaxed, more human somehow. Good you came, he said, setting down his bag. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, Lyra admitted. This is probably a waste of time. Maybe, or maybe not. We won't know until we try. Jake pulled 2 wooden practice sticks from his bag. First lesson, forget everything you've been taught about Valdrin combat. Can you do that? Lyra thought about the years of failed training, the disappointed looks from her instructors, the mocking from her brothers. Yes, I can do that. Good. Now show me how you've been taught to stand. Lyra took the wide, solid stance her instructors had drilled into her. Feet apart, weight evenly distributed, blade held high. It was designed to make a warrior unmovable, a mountain of strength. Jake walked around her, studying her position. That stance works for your brothers because they have the mass and strength to hold it. But for you, it's all wrong. You're fighting against your own body. He tapped her front foot with his practice stick. You're small and light. That's not a weakness. It's an advantage. You can move faster, change direction quicker, but not if you're trying to plant yourself like a tree. He demonstrated a different stance. His feet were closer together, his weight on the balls of his feet, ready to move in any direction. Try this. Lyra copied his position. It felt wrong at first, unstable. But when Jake pushed her gently, she found she could slide back and recover, whereas in her old stance she would have fallen. Better, Jake said. Now let's talk about strikes. Show me how you've been taught to attack. Lyra swung her practice stick in a powerful overhead arc using both hands, putting all her weight behind it. It was slow and telegraphed, meant to crush through an opponent's defense with pure force. Stop, Jake said. If you miss with that swing or if someone blocks it, what happens? I'm off balance. Open to counterattack. Exactly. You've been taught to trade hits, to trust that your strength and armor will protect you. But you don't have that luxury. He showed her a different approach. Quick jabs, short strikes, attacking and retreating before the opponent could respond. Think of it like this. An avalanche is powerful, but it's slow and can be avoided. A striking snake is fast, precise, deadly. Which would you rather be? They trained for 2 hours that first night. Jake taught her to move constantly, never staying in one place, using angles and footwork to avoid attacks rather than blocking them. He showed her pressure points on the Valdrin body where even a weak strike could cause pain or numbness. He taught her to read an opponent's body language, to see attacks coming before they happened. When they finally stopped, Lyra was exhausted but exhilarated. For the first time, combat didn't feel like a battle against her own inadequacy. It felt possible. Same time tomorrow? Jake asked. Yes, Lyra said without hesitation. The training became a nightly ritual. Jake would finish his diplomatic meetings and Lyra would slip away from the palace after dinner. In the hidden garden under the light of the twin moons, the human captain taught the failed princess how to be a warrior. He told her stories as they trained. Stories of human history, of warriors who succeeded despite being underestimated. He spoke of a woman named Boudica, who led armies against an empire. Of fighter pilots who were small and quick, turning those traits into advantages. Of martial artists who could defeat opponents twice their size with technique alone. Humans aren't the strongest, fastest, or toughest species in the galaxy, Jake said one night as they rested. But we're survivors. We adapt, we learn, we find ways to win that others don't expect. Is that why you're helping me? Lyra asked. Because I'm an underdog. Jake considered the question. Partly, but also because I see something in you that you don't see yourself. You have the most important quality a warrior can have. What's that? You don't quit. You could have given up years ago. You could have accepted what everyone told you and lived a quiet life in the palace. But you're still here, still training, still trying. That's not weakness, princess. That's steel. As weeks passed, Lyra grew stronger and more skilled. Not in the Valdrin way, but in her own way. She learned to use her size to slip past defenses, her speed to strike before her opponent could react. Jake taught her to think several moves ahead, to turn an enemy's strength against them. One night, Jake brought a datapad with him. I want to show you something, he said, pulling up a video. It showed a small human woman fighting a much larger male opponent in some kind of training ring. The woman moved like water, flowing around the man's attacks, striking with precision at joints and pressure points. Within minutes, the larger fighter was on the ground, defeated. That's Lieutenant Kate Hudson, Jake explained. She's one of our best hand-to-hand combat instructors. She weighs maybe 50 kilos. He weighs 90. But she wins every time because she fights smart. Lyra watched the video 3 times, studying every movement. Could I do that? You're already doing it. You just need to believe you can. But believing was hard. Years of failure had carved deep scars in Lyra's confidence. One evening, after a particularly frustrating training session where she couldn't master a complex disarming technique, she threw her practice stick down in anger. I can't do this, she said, her voice breaking. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe I'm just not meant to be a warrior. Jake picked up the stick and handed it back to her. Do you know what separates a warrior from everyone else? It's not strength or skill. It's this. Warriors keep fighting even when they think they can't win. Especially then. That sounds like stupidity, not courage. Maybe it's both, Jake said with a slight smile. But it's also how victories happen. You think your brothers never fail at something? They do. But because they're supposed to be warriors, everyone forgives their failures and celebrates their successes. You don't get that luxury. You have to be twice as good to be seen as half as capable. It's not fair. But that's reality. Lyra picked up the stick again, her jaw set. Show me the technique again. They practiced until she could do it smoothly, until the movements became natural. And when she finally disarmed Jake cleanly, sending his practice stick flying across the clearing, they both laughed. See? Jake said. You've got this. But their secret training couldn't last forever. One night as they practiced, a voice called out from the darkness. Sister? Is that you? Prince Kale stepped into the clearing, his eyes widening as he saw Lyra and Jake together. His expression shifted from surprise to anger. What is this? He demanded. Are you training with the human? Lyra straightened, refusing to show fear even though her heart raced. Yes, Captain Morrison has been teaching me. Kale's hand moved to the sword at his belt. The human has been teaching you? Teaching you what? How to embarrass our family further. Father will hear about this. Your sister has talent, Jake said calmly, stepping slightly in front of Lyra. She just needs proper instruction. Talent? Kale laughed harshly. She's weak. Always has been, always will be. You're wasting your time, human. And you, he pointed at Lyra, are deluding yourself. Some things can't be changed. He turned and walked away, but Lyra knew the damage was done. By tomorrow, the whole palace would know. Her father would know. She waited for the summons that would end everything. The summons came at dawn. A palace guard knocked on Lyra's door and told her the king required her presence in the throne room immediately. She dressed quickly, her stomach tight with anxiety. This was it. Her father would forbid her from training, probably confine her to her quarters, maybe even accelerate her arranged marriage to get rid of his embarrassing daughter once and for all. When she entered the throne room, she found it crowded with nobles and military commanders. Her brothers stood near the throne, looking smug. Jake was there too, standing with his fellow humans, his face carefully neutral. King Vorath sat on his throne like a mountain of stone and anger. "Lyra," the king's voice boomed across the hall, "is it true you've been training in secret with the human?" There was no point in lying. "Yes, father." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nobles looked amused, others disgusted. Her father's expression darkened. "You shame yourself and this family. You were told years ago that you lacked the strength to be a warrior. Yet you persist in this fantasy. And now you consort with aliens, learning their weak techniques. Your Majesty," Jake stepped forward, "Princess Lyra has made remarkable progress. She has real potential if trained properly." "Silence, human," Kyle snapped. "You've done enough damage. You filled my sister's head with false hope." Before anyone could respond, a guard rushed into the throne room. "Your Majesty." "Urgent news from the border." King Vorath gestured for the guard to continue. The man's face was pale. "The Krell Dominion has attacked 3 of our colonies. They've destroyed the garrison on Theros and are moving toward our core systems. They're using strange tactics, hidden run attacks, striking from unexpected angles. Our traditional formations can't pin them down." The room erupted in angry voices. The Krell were an old enemy, but they had been quiet for years. This was a serious threat. "Gather the fleet," King Vorath commanded. "We will crush these cowards. Kale, Marcus, Drake, you will each command a battle group." Lyra's 3 brothers straightened with pride. This was their moment, their chance to prove themselves in real combat. "I want to go too," Lyra heard herself say. The words came out before she could stop them. The throne room went silent. Then Kale laughed and others joined him. "You?" Kale said. "Sister, this is war, not a training exercise. You would be killed in seconds. Or worse, you'd endanger others trying to protect you," Marcus added. King Vorath held up his hand for silence. He looked at Lyra with something that might have been disappointment or pity. "No, daughter. You will stay here where you're safe. This is not your place." Lyra felt the familiar shame wash over her, but before she could retreat, Jake spoke up again. "Your Majesty, perhaps there's a compromise. The Earth Alliance would like to offer tactical advisors to your fleet. We've fought the Krell before and understand their methods. I could accompany your forces and provide insights." The king considered this. Having human assistance would strengthen the alliance, and it would be foolish to refuse knowledge of the enemy. "Very well, Captain Morrison. You may join the fleet as an observer and advisor. But you'll need a liaison. Someone who understands both Valdrin military protocols and can translate between our peoples." "I volunteer for that role," Lyra said quickly. "I've been working with Captain Morrison for weeks. I understand how he thinks, how humans approach problems. I can be useful." King Vorath looked like he wanted to refuse, but the logic was sound. Having Lyra as a liaison would keep her out of real danger while maintaining diplomatic appearances. "Fine," he said finally. "But you will not engage in combat. You are there to facilitate communication only. Is that understood?" "Yes, father." 3 days later, the Valdrin fleet assembled in orbit. 60 warships, each one massive and powerful, bristling with weapons. Lyra's brothers commanded the 3 largest vessels, each eager to win glory. Lyra and Jake were assigned to the fleet flagship, where Admiral Thorne commanded the overall battle group. As they traveled to the border systems, Jake spent time with Lyra reviewing Krell tactics. He showed her recordings of previous battles, pointing out patterns. "The Krell fight like Earth's guerrilla warriors," he explained. "They don't care about honor or facing enemies directly. They hit weak points, retreat, regroup, and hit somewhere else. Your brothers are going to try to force them into a straight fight. But that's exactly what the Krell want them to do. They'll exhaust your fleet chasing shadows. What would you do differently? Smaller, faster response teams. Set up ambush points of our own. Use their tactics against them. But your military commanders won't listen to that. They'll see it as cowardly." Lyra thought about her own training, how she had learned to fight against larger, stronger opponents. The parallel was clear. When they reached Theros, they found the colony in ruins. The Krell had struck hard and vanished. Admiral Thorne deployed the fleet in a traditional battle formation, and waited for the enemy to show themselves. They didn't have to wait long. The Krell appeared from 3 directions at once, small fast ships that darted in, fired and retreated before the Valdrin could respond effectively. Kale led his battle group in an aggressive charge, but the Krell scattered, leading him into a field of mines they'd planted earlier. Several Valdrin ships took heavy damage. From the flagship's bridge, Lyra watched the battle with growing frustration. It was like watching someone trying to punch smoke. The Valdrin were stronger, better armed, but the Krell were making them look clumsy and slow. "They're separating our forces," Jake muttered beside her, drawing each battle group away from the others. "Classic divide and conquer." "Admiral," Lyra ventured, "perhaps we should pull the battle groups back together, present a unified front." Admiral Thorne barely glanced at her. "We don't retreat from cowards, Princess. Your brothers will run down these Krell vermin soon enough." But they didn't. The battle dragged on for hours, with the Valdrin suffering casualties while the Krell remained elusive. Then disaster struck. Kyle's flagship took a direct hit to its engines and went dead in space. Before the Valdrin could respond, Krell boarding ships attached to its hull like parasites. "They're boarding Kale's ship," someone shouted. Admiral Thorne immediately ordered a rescue mission, but it would take time to reach Kale's position. Time they might not have. Lyra made a decision. She grabbed Jake's arm. "Come with me." "Where are we going?" "To save my brother." They ran through the flagship's corridors to the shuttle bay. Lyra commandeered a small transport shuttle, overriding the pilot's protest with her royal authority. "Princess, you can't," the pilot said. "Your father's orders." "My father isn't here. Get me a boarding team now." 5 Valdrin Marines joined them, more out of confusion than conviction. They launched from the flagship and raced toward Kale's disabled vessel. As they approached, they could see Krell ships swarming around it. "This is insane," one of the Marines said. "We'll be killed before we reach the airlock." "Not if we do this right," Lyra said. She looked at Jake. "Trust me?" He nodded. "Always." Lyra flew the shuttle in an erratic pattern, mimicking the way the Krell ships moved, unpredictable and random. She took them under Kale's ship, using its bulk as cover, and brought them to a maintenance airlock on the far side where the Krell weren't watching. They breached the airlock and entered the ship. Inside was chaos. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and the sounds of combat echoed through the halls. The Krell had taken the main bridge and were hunting for survivors. "We can't fight through them head-on," Jake whispered. "There are too many," Lyra thought fast. "We don't need to. We just need to reach the bridge and get my brother out. There are maintenance tunnels throughout the ship. We can use those." They moved through the narrow passages, avoiding Krell patrols. When they encountered enemies, Lyra used everything Jake had taught her. Quick strikes, pressure points using the enemy's own momentum against them. The Marines watched in shock as the princess they'd thought was useless took down Krell warriors twice her size. They reached the bridge from above, dropping through a maintenance hatch. Kale and 6 of his crew were pinned down behind consoles, fighting desperately against a dozen Krell soldiers. Lyra's rescue team dropped into the bridge from above, catching the Krell completely by surprise. In the confusion, Lyra moved like water through the chaos. She wasn't trying to match the Krell's strength. Instead, she struck at joints and weak points using their own aggression against them, exactly as Jake had taught her. One Krell warrior swung a massive blade at her. She ducked under it, drove her knee into the side of his leg, and used his falling momentum to throw him into 2 of his companions. The Marines, inspired by her example, fought with renewed energy. Within minutes, the bridge was secured. Kale stared at his sister as if seeing her for the first time. Blood ran down his face from a cut above his eye, and his left arm hung uselessly at his side. "Lyra, how did you—" "We need to move now," she interrupted. "More Krell will be coming." "Can you walk?" "Yes, but then let's go." They fought their way back to the shuttle, picking up survivors along the way. By the time they reached the airlock, they had rescued 23 crew members, including Kale. The Krell realized what was happening and tried to stop them, but Lyra's team was already launching, racing back to the fleet. When they docked with the flagship, Admiral Thorne was waiting. His face was a mixture of anger and confusion. "Princess Lyra, you directly disobeyed orders. You could have been killed. You could have started a diplomatic incident." He stopped, looking at the rescued crew members filing off the shuttle. "You saved Prince Kale." "I did what was necessary," Lyra said simply. Kale stepped forward, his wounded arm now wrapped in emergency bandages. "Admiral, my sister just led a rescue mission deep into enemy-held territory. She and her team extracted 23 personnel under combat conditions. I'm alive because of her actions." The Admiral didn't know what to say. In Valdrin culture, successful military action spoke louder than any protocol violation. Lyra had broken the rules, but she had also achieved results that mattered. News of the rescue spread through the fleet within hours. The failed princess had saved the crown prince. Some saw it as a fluke. Others whispered that maybe there was more to Lyra than anyone had thought. But the war wasn't over. The Krell launched an even larger assault, and intelligence reports suggested they were planning to attack the Valdrin homeworld itself. King Vorath, monitoring the battle from the capital, sent urgent orders. All 3 of his sons had been wounded in the fighting. New commanders were needed. The king faced an impossible choice. His military tradition said only proven warriors could lead battle groups. But his proven warriors were injured or dead, and the Krell were coming. Admiral Thorn made a suggestion that would have been unthinkable a week earlier. "Your Majesty, Princess Lyra has demonstrated tactical ability and courage under fire. She successfully led a boarding action against superior forces. I recommend we give her command of a light cruiser." There was stunned silence over the communication channel. Then King Vorath spoke, his voice heavy with reluctance. "Very well. Let it not be said that I denied my people the leaders they need, no matter how unconventional. Lyra will take command of the cruiser Shadowblade, but she receives no special treatment. If she fails, she answers for it like any commander." Lyra accepted the assignment, knowing it was both an opportunity and a test. She was being given the smallest, least important ship in the fleet. If she succeeded, it would be dismissed as luck. If she failed, it would confirm everything everyone already believed about her. Jake helped her select a crew. They couldn't choose from the elite warriors, so they picked the misfits and outcasts, Valdrin who were too small, too questioning, too different from the warrior ideal, soldiers who had been overlooked their entire careers. "These are the rejects," the personnel officer said with barely concealed contempt when he saw Lyra's selections. "Good," Lyra replied. "So am I." She gathered her new crew in the Shadowblade's small briefing room. They looked uncertain, probably expecting another commander who would treat them as inferior. "I won't lie to you," Lyra said. "Every other ship in this fleet thinks we're a joke. They expect us to fail. They've probably already written us off. That gives us an advantage." "What advantage?" one crew member asked skeptically. "Nobody expects anything from us. So we're free to try new things, to fight in ways they won't. The Krell are beating us because they don't fight by our rules. Well, neither will we." Over the next 2 days, Lyra drilled her crew in unconventional tactics. She taught them to think like Jake had taught her to fight. Don't meet strength with strength. Find the weak points, move fast, strike where unexpected. Jake helped design specialized maneuvers based on human naval doctrine. The Shadowblade was small and quick, perfect for the kind of fluid combat they were planning. When the Krell fleet finally arrived, it was massive. Intelligence had been wrong. This wasn't just an attack, it was an invasion force. Hundreds of ships, enough to overwhelm the Valdrin defense fleet through sheer numbers. Admiral Thorn formed the traditional battle line, every ship side by side, preparing to meet the enemy head-on. It was how Valdrin had always fought. Meet your enemy, stand your ground, win through superior strength and courage. The Krell didn't care about Valdrin traditions. They swarmed around the battle line like insects, attacking from multiple angles, targeting engines and weapons, slowly dismantling the defense fleet piece by piece. "We're losing," Jake said quietly as they watched from the Shadowblade's bridge. "They're doing to the whole fleet what they did to Kale's ship." Lyra studied the tactical display. The Krell ship seemed chaotic, but there was a pattern. They all responded to signals from a single large vessel hanging back from the main battle. "A command ship. If we destroy their command ship, the Krell fleet loses coordination," she said. "True, but it's protected by their entire fleet. We'd have to go through hundreds of ships to reach it." "Not through," Lyra said slowly. "Around," she called Admiral Thorn. "Sir, I believe I've identified the Krell command vessel. Request permission to engage." "Denied, Princess. Your orders are to maintain position in the battle line." "Admiral, if we stay in the line, we lose. The Krell are picking us apart. We need to change tactics," I said. "Denied." "That's an order." Lyra looked at Jake, then at her crew. They were all watching her, waiting for her decision. "Helm," she said. Plot a course around the battle. Keep us out of the main fighting. Navigation, I need you to find every asteroid, debris field, and sensor shadow between here and that Krell command ship. Princess, the Admiral said. Her first officer began. I heard what he said, but I'm the captain of this ship and I'm responsible for this crew. We're going to end this battle, even if it means court-martial afterward. The crew exchanged glances, then grins spread across their faces. Finally, someone was treating them like they mattered. The Shadow Blade broke formation and accelerated away from the battle line. Alarms went off on the flagship's bridge as they detected Lyra's ship leaving its position. Shadow Blade, return to formation immediately, Admiral Thorne commanded. Lyra switched off the communication channel. They raced through space using every trick to avoid detection. When Krell scouts appeared, they hid in debris fields or behind asteroids. When sensors swept their area, they went silent and drifted like wreckage. It was the opposite of traditional Valdran warfare, which valued directness and courage over stealth and cunning. It took them an hour to reach the edge of the Krell formation. The command ship loomed ahead, enormous and heavily armed. It was protected by a screen of escort vessels, but they were focused on the main battle, not watching for threats from unexpected directions. This is insane, the weapons officer muttered. Even if we get through, one light cruiser can't destroy that ship. We don't have to destroy it, Lyra said. We just have to damage it enough to disrupt their coordination. Target their communications array and main sensor grid. Prepare for attack run. All power to engines and forward shields. One pass, full weapons, then we get out fast. Understood? The crew acknowledged. They were scared, but they were ready. The Shadow Blade shot forward like an arrow. The Krell escorts detected them too late, their weapons tracking slowly as the light cruiser blazed past. Lyra's crew fired everything they had at the command ship's communications tower. Explosions rippled across its hull as the tower collapsed in a shower of debris. But they weren't done yet. The Shadow Blade rolled and came around for a second pass, this time targeting the massive sensor array that coordinated the entire Krell fleet. More hits, more explosions. The sensor array went dark. Now the Krell were fully aware of them. Every gun on the command ship turned toward the Shadow Blade. Energy weapons lit up space as they fired. Evasive maneuvers, Lyra shouted. Her pilot sent the ship spinning and diving, dodging fire that would have vaporized them instantly. They were small and fast, but the Krell had numbers. Escort ships were closing in from all sides. We're not going to make it out, the weapons officer said. Yes, we are, Lyra said firmly. Jake, remember that maneuver you told me about? The one from the battle at Europa? Jake's eyes widened. The slingshot? That's crazy. If we miscalculate by even a few degrees, then we die. Same as if we stay here. Helm, input coordinates. We're going to use the command ship's gravity well to accelerate and change direction. They dove straight at the command ship, engines at maximum. Every alarm on the bridge was screaming. The Krell thought they were on a suicide run and concentrated all fire on the Shadow Blade. Shields flickered and failed as hit after hit struck their hull. At the last possible second, the helm threw the ship into a hard turn, using the command ship's own mass to whip them around and shoot them away at incredible speed. The Krell ships that had been pursuing couldn't match the maneuver. Some crashed into each other trying to turn. Others overshot completely. The Shadow Blade limped away, trailing atmosphere and debris, but they were alive and accelerating back toward the Valdran fleet. Behind them, the effects of their attack became clear. Without the command ship's coordination, the Krell fleet fell into confusion. Ships stopped responding to signals, formations broke apart, attack patterns collapsed into chaos. Admiral Thorne saw the opportunity immediately. All ships, General, advance. Hit them while they're disorganized! The Valdran fleet, which had been slowly losing, suddenly pressed forward. Without central coordination, the Krell couldn't mount an effective defense. Individual ship captains made their own decisions, many choosing to retreat. What had been an organized invasion became a rout. Within an hour it was over. The Krell fleet was scattered, broken, fleeing back toward their own territory. The Valdran had won, but it had been close. Without the Shadow Blade's desperate gambit, they would have lost. As the Shadow Blade docked with the flagship for repairs, Lyra expected to be arrested for disobeying orders. Instead, she found Admiral Thorne waiting with an honor guard. Princess Lyra, he said formally, you disobeyed a direct order in combat. Yes, sir. I did. You also saved this fleet and possibly our entire world. I'm recommending you for the Star of Valor, our highest military honor." Lyra didn't know what to say. She had spent her whole life being told she wasn't good enough, and now she was being given the highest recognition her people could offer. 2 days later, a transmission arrived from King Vorath. He wanted to speak with his daughter directly. Lyra stood alone in the communication room facing her father's image on the screen. He looked older than she remembered, tired and worn, but his eyes, when they met hers, held something she had never seen before. Respect. "Lyra," he began, his voice softer than usual, "I have read the reports of your actions. Admiral Thorne has recommended you for honors. Your brothers, all 3 of them, have spoken in your favor. Even Kale, who opposed your training, says you saved his life. I did what needed to be done, Father." "Yes, you did." The king was silent for a moment. "I was wrong about you. For years I measured you against your brothers, against the traditional standards of our warriors. I saw only what you lacked, not what you possessed. That was my failure, not yours." Tears stung Lyra's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I'm still not like them. I'm still small, still different," the king interrupted. "You're different, and perhaps that's exactly what we need. This war showed me that our old ways, our traditions, they're not always enough. The galaxy is changing and we must change with it or be left behind." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that when you return home, you will not be married off to some minor noble. Instead, I'm creating a new position, Ambassador of Strategic Innovation. You will work with other species, learn their ways of war and peace, and teach us what we need to know. You will bridge the old and the new." It was more than Lyra had ever dreamed of. Not just acceptance, but a real role, real purpose. "Thank you, Father. Don't thank me. You earned this. I only wish I had seen it sooner." The king's expression softened. "I'm proud of you, daughter. I should have said that long ago." After the transmission ended, Lyra found Jake in the observation deck looking out at the stars. "I heard the news," he said. "Ambassador of Strategic Innovation. Sounds important." "It's terrifying," Lyra admitted. "I have no idea how to do this job." "You'll figure it out. You always do," Jake smiled. "My mission here is complete. The Endeavor leaves tomorrow. We're heading back to Earth." Lyra felt a pang of loss. Jake had been more than a teacher. He had been the first person to believe in her, to see past her failures to her potential. "Will you come back?" "Maybe. The galaxy is big and Earth has lots of interests out here. But even if I don't, you'll be fine. You don't need me anymore. I'll always need friends like you. Then you'll always have me. Just call and I'll come if I can." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Then Jake spoke again. "You know what the best part of all this is?" "What?" "All those people who said you couldn't be a warrior? They were right in a way. You're not a warrior like your brothers. You're something better. You're a warrior who thinks, who adapts, who finds new solutions to old problems. The galaxy needs more of that." 3 months later, Lyra stood in a training facility on the Valdrin homeworld. 50 young Valdrin sat before her, all of them recruits who had been rejected from traditional military training. Too small, too weak, too different, just like she had been. "My name is Ambassador Lyra," she said, "and I'm here to teach you that strength comes in many forms. You've been told you can't be warriors because you don't fit the traditional mold. I'm here to tell you that the mold is broken and it's time we made a new one." She saw hope kindle in their eyes, the same hope that had lit in her own when Jake first offered to train her. She thought of him now, somewhere out among the stars, probably helping someone else discover their own strength. "Let me tell you about a human named Jake Morrison," she continued. "He taught me that being different isn't being broken. It's just being yourself, and sometimes being yourself is the strongest thing you can be." As she began the first lesson, teaching these rejected recruits the same techniques Jake had taught her, Lyra felt a deep sense of rightness. This was her purpose. Not to become like her brothers, but to help others find their own path, their own way to be strong. In the back of the training hall, King Vorath watched through a one-way window. Beside him stood Admiral Thorne. "She's changed them already," the Admiral observed. "Look at their faces. They believe." "She changed me too," the king said quietly. "I thought she was a problem, a daughter who would never amount to anything. The human saw what I couldn't, a warrior who needed to be taught differently, not dismissed. Perhaps we have much to learn from humans after all. Shall I arrange more exchange programs with Earth? Yes, and not just military. Science, culture, philosophy. If humans can teach us to see strength in places we've overlooked, Imagine what else they might show us. Down in the training hall, Lyra was demonstrating a basic defensive technique. One of the smaller recruits, a young male barely old enough to enlist, performed it perfectly on his first try. Excellent, Lyra praised him. You see? Your size isn't a weakness. It makes you faster, harder to hit. Use it, the recruit beamed with pride. Lyra remembered that feeling. The first time Jake had praised her technique instead of criticizing her weakness. She was passing that gift forward now, helping others discover their own potential. As the training session continued, Lyra caught her reflection in a polished metal panel. She saw not the failed princess she used to be, but the warrior she had become. Not despite being different, but because of it. Jake had been right all along. The size of the warrior didn't matter. What mattered was the size of the fight in the warrior's heart. And Lyra's heart, it turned out, was more than big enough. Years later, historians would mark this period as the beginning of the great change in Valdrin society. The time when they learned to value different kinds of strength, to see potential in places they had overlooked, to adapt and grow instead of clinging to rigid traditions. But for Lyra, standing in that training hall, teaching the next generation of warriors, it was simply the beginning of her real life. Not the life others had planned for her, but the life she had earned through determination, courage, and the belief of one human who refused to see her as broken. She was Ambassador Lyra, teacher and warrior, bridge between worlds, and she was exactly who she was meant to be. The end.